Welcome to Derm-It Trotter. Don't swear about skincare, where host Dr. Shannon C. Trotter, a board-certified dermatologist, sits down with fellow dermatologists and skincare experts to separate fact from fiction and simplify skincare. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Derm-It Trotter Don't Swear About Skincare podcast. I've got a special friend and guest here on today, Dr. Elizabeth Muennich, and we're going to talk about a sensitive topic, skincare down there. For all you women out there that have a lot of questions and maybe don't really appreciate that there are some special things we do recommend in dermatology to really help you with skincare in those nether regions. But on to Dr. Muennich. She is the president and CEO of Dermatology and Skincare. She is board certified in dermatology and attended Columbia University, earning her undergraduate degree in neuroscience. She completed her MD and PhD from Wright State University, and she's a fellow in the American Academy of Dermatology and actually served as chief resident during her tenure of residency. She's an assistant professor at Wright State University School of Medicine, Department of Dermatology, and she's currently the president of the Ohio State Medical Association and a dear friend. Elizabeth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shannon. Glad to be here.
So there's nothing better than having a friend on when you need to talk about sensitive topics. And Elizabeth's somebody I can pretty much say anything to. So I knew she was perfect to come on and talk about skincare down there. So I really want you to kind of help us set the record straight for our listeners out there. Skin in the vaginal area. Can you just clarify, does this need special care or treatment, just so everyone's on the same page out there?
Yes, no, that's a great question. Not necessarily. I think as long as you're using an antibacterial soap, I think that's helpful. Your general body washes. You have to be careful though, because there are a lot of chemicals and things that irritate skin in, as you said, the nether regions, so in our most sensitive parts, and especially if they're not well washed off, because soaps and cleansers are meant to be wash off products, not leave on products. So if someone is not doing a good job of rinsing and it's hanging around, you can definitely see some irritant dermatitis.
Yeah, so people can get like an irritation or a rash that you might think of. And I think too, when we think of skin, in that area, I always like to tell people, think of it as two different types of skin. You have the skin kind of on top that looks like the rest of the skin on your arms and your legs, kind of that area we call the mons. And on the outside area, we call the lips. You have kind of that normal, if you feel like a regular appearing skin. And then on the inside, you have what we call, mucosal skin. So a little bit of special or different skin. So I think it's hard for people to know, like, what are you talking about when you talk about skin in that area? So if you have a patient that comes in and says, how do I take care of my vaginal skin? How do you kind of explain that to them, that there's different types, and what do you recommend that they do?
Well, we usually start by just talking about the anatomy, and I completely 100% think that you're on the right track by saying, well, the outside is it's thicker skin. It's like the regular skin on our arms and legs, and that can tolerate a lot more. That's thicker skin. And when you talk about the mucosa, the skin in the interior, that's more of the labia minora and heading into the vaginal canal, that's mucosa. So that skin can be much more sensitive. So they really need to be careful. And you had a question about, douching and things like that. It's like, no, that's not necessary. I mean, our body is amazing. We have our own innate immunity in the skin just to take care of that area. And I think in the vaginal canal, we oftentimes have not excessive, but we should have a little bit of sloughing of that skin just to rid us of irritants, excess bacteria, and that type of thing.
So if somebody comes in, and you may have heard this talked about, I didn't even know this term. My staff educated me on a vagacial, which I had no idea even existed. And several of them like, oh, I've even had one. And it was a part of maybe like a waxing routine. For those of you that already know what it is, you know what I'm talking about. But can you explain a bit of what a vagacial is, and if it's even something you really need to have in that area?
Yes. Well, I think that's really going to do a lot of more cleanup, especially with the hair, because I think they're doing some waxing. They're probably doing some trimming. Um, there are some hilarious comedy routines on there are jewels that you can put in the area that can be glued onto the pubic hair. And that's the whole bedazzling became a vajazzling. So there are some interesting things that people do to that area. But I think it's just sensitive skincare. I think if you're using a good sensitive skin cleanser, you should be fine. And you don't need to take that into the interior, into the vaginal canal.
Mhm.
I wonder, and I don't know if you've heard about this, we really didn't talk about this, but with the Loom products that are coming out for deodorant, it's like you
Mhm.
can have, as you know, anywhere, irritant and allergic contact dermatitis. So if anyone's having a rash from any of these products, I'm like, well, do you really need these in the first place? I think just good hygiene goes a long way. And you might not need to use a masking fragrance or something like that. I think it's more of a hype right now. And when they're doing these vaginal facials, I have seen, and this is in our area where it almost looks like it's a bidet type situation where people are sitting on these. It's like a cleansing device that is just doing a deeper cleaning, but it's like, well, do they need that? It's like the whole
Right.
colonic thing. If we ask our GI friends, do you need a colonic or does your colon function? Do
Yeah.
we need a vaginal facial? I mean, I'm sure, for those that are getting ornate waxes and vajazzling, sure, you probably want to have a professional do that. But aside from what actually has to happen, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to point out. Like it might be relaxing or it might be a part of another service that you're getting for that skin, but are they necessarily a requirement for good skin health in that area? Probably necessarily not. I mean, just like, your face, you can cleanse and exfoliate and people can get rid of some of the blackheads that maybe are popping out or moisturize your face as a part of a facial there. I think for vaginal skin, yeah, if somebody wants that, it could be a possible thing that might be helpful. But also, as you mentioned, you got to be careful of irritation from those products, or could you be potentially allergic to one of those products? So maybe proceed with caution, but not something like you said, that is a definite requirement for skin to maintain its
Oh,
health in that area.
Oh, for sure. And as you know, like we don't have very large oil glands in this area. It's not like we're prone to blackheads or comedones. You can get cysts and Bartholin gland cysts, and there are other skin appendages that can cause problems for people with cystic type things. But that's not, reach for the acne, reach for the benzoyl peroxide, reach for the harsh cleansers in this area. You really just want to keep it mild.
And then for kind of more the inner skin or kind of that wet mucosal skin, do you recommend using a gentle cleanser on occasion if people feel like they need it? Or do you feel like, again, the vaginal area is self-cleaning. We know that, there's lots of yeast bacteria and other fun organisms that live there for a purpose. But do you feel like on occasion, it'd be okay to use something gentle if people feel like they needed to cleanse that area?
I think it's okay if they're using a gentle cleanser, but I would definitely don't overdo it. And
Mhm.
it's great that you mentioned that. And we are learning more and more about the biome and these necessary bacteria that are in different places of our body. So if you're really doing aggressive cleansing, you're going to be completely disrupting the natural skin flora and fauna. And if it's disrupted down there, and you erase all of your good bacteria, then the bad bacteria and the fungal, we're just going to get a complete and total imbalance. So that's
Mhm.
again where we see some of the rashes that people can have.
So for moisturizer, for kind of, you would moisturize your arms and legs if they're dry. If somebody felt like they needed a moisturizer, then for kind of that, regular skin that you would say, or kind of, the classic skin we think of on the outside area of the vaginal area, would you recommend using like a light moisturizer or something to help with that skin to keep it hydrated as well?
You could. I'd still be very cautious in that area just because of the possibility of getting such an irritant or allergic reaction. And we also know that you can get fungal problems as well. So you have to look like, are you really dry? Are you
Mhm.
irritated? Maybe you need an antifungal because the antifungals have a very moisturizing vehicle. So like our typical antifungals you can get over the counter, those are the 1% terbinafines. They're going to have a moisturizing vehicle that is okay for the vaginal area. So they could try that. But they can also do Vaseline, plain old petroleum jelly. And then if they need to, some of the diaper pastes, I mean, I know like if we're throwing out name brands, like Desitin has a cod liver oil base, so that might not be the nicest cosmetic smell. So you might want to look at like Aveeno one that's a lavender scent that's not going to smell like it's god awful. I noticed that when I use that on my kids. I was thinking that is terrible. But if they're just using a regular Vaseline or like a diaper paste that doesn't have a bad scent, that can be also very protective because that's going to have a zinc oxide paste, which is fine for down there. You want to protect as well as moisturize. You don't just want to go in with a too harsh or abrasive chemical.
Mhm. No, I think that's really important. And some people will complain, of dryness on the outside. They might even have, underlying eczema or something else to explain that dryness or that skin just gets irritated. But it's good to know that, you can use products like petroleum jelly or other, emollients in that area as long as they're gentle and tend to be non-irritating to hydrate that skin. As for kind of the inner skin too, or again, that mucosal wet skin, do you ever recommend moisturizing agents that can be used in that area as well?
I usually don't, because I think the issue is when people complain of problems and dryness, they actually might have an underlying dermatologic condition that is like a lichen sclerosis, or they're actually having skin problems. So we need to make sure that that skin is 100%. And why are they having that issue? Because oftentimes we can treat that medically, and that even might need a topical steroid. Like sometimes I use clobetasol, which is a prescription grade topical steroid in that area, if they're having a lichen sclerosis or if they're having a very difficult allergy or reaction to a product.
Mhm,
Then that's a medical treatment, so that you
mhm.
definitely want to get that looked at by your physician.
No, that's a really good point you mentioned because even though we're talking about dryness and skincare, people are going on the assumption that everything is normal looking. It's hard to obviously visualize that on yourself if you're taking a peek. So, if you're experiencing quite a bit of dryness on the outside or inside area, if you have itch or burn or other symptoms, it may be more than just dryness. There may be a true skin condition that needs to actually be evaluated and diagnosed and treated medically. There are some products, they'll talk about that are kind of specifically formulated, for the vaginal area. You can moisturize the outer skin or even the vulvar area, which again kind of refers to collectively kind of that wet mucosal skin kind of extending back. So if people are looking for products, I would encourage you to look for things that are more specific to that area if you feel like you need them, but be careful because they still can cause irritation or potentially even allergy, depending upon just how your skin responds to them. So it can be more sensitive too. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as well.
No,
So,
for sure. And you mentioned an eczema. People can definitely have atopic dermatitis or an eczema. They can also have psoriasis. And
mhm,
psoriasis looks different because in that area, as we know, it's more of an inverse psoriasis. It's not necessarily a scaly, flaky type picture, but it's just red and irritated. And they might
mhm.
say, "Oh, my skin's so irritated." And you're like, "Wow, you have psoriasis." So we need to back up. We need to treat this.
So beyond that too, if we talked about, just kind of skincare, moisturization in that area, what about clothing? Do you have particular recommendations? Because I feel like clothing's a big question that people don't realize, even certain clothes can irritate that area or cause problems, maybe even laundry detergents as well, or fabric softeners. What do you tend to recommend that's safest for vaginal skin in that area?
Oh yes, no, I like a free and clear or Tide, and most of the major um, laundry makers do have a less allergenic line, and I think that's good. If someone's having irritation, they really should look at what are they using to wash their clothes, dry their clothes, what is their fabric softener. And then I do think that area needs to breathe a little bit, so breathability is helpful with a like a organic cotton or some type of fabric that has a little bit of give. I think that we do ourselves an injustice by using super tight clothing. You just have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, I would agree because I feel like you do need like loose fitting clothing can be better. It doesn't trap in that moisture in that location. I think also, stay away sometimes from certain dyes or preservatives in clothing can cause it. Sometimes white cotton underwear might be a better choice for people that are irritated by certain fabrics or things that hold on to materials in your laundry. Because not only the detergents, like you mentioned, you have the unstoppables now, for that
Mhm.
scent that people want, or they might put in those dryer sheets or things like that too that try to, help make our clothes smell great, but often fragrance and things like that might not be so great for the vaginal area. So I think it's important that people think about that too, that you definitely want to go more gentle, whether it's the moisturizer, cleansers we talked about, also laundry detergents and softeners can play a role. Maybe go for dryer balls instead and go for that free and clear, like you mentioned as well. And
Mhm.
then I think too, the other thing that kind of gets, maybe glossed over is also things we're using in that area like panty liners or maxi pads or things that might have fragrance or irritation too, just to kind of put that on everyone's radar. Sometimes it's something you think you're using to help or a particular issue or concern, or maybe when you're on your period, but it could be causing you some problems that you don't even appreciate. So just kind of keep
Mhm.
that in mind too. But I always like to kind of bridge into like, what are the big no-nos for this area? Because I think, as a dermatologist, people will come in with rash or itch in the vaginal area, and if it was like on their arm, they might douse their arm with alcohol. They got a terrible mosquito bite, and I've known people to put rubbing alcohol and they're like, oh, it just gets that itch out.
Yeah.
And what
Right.
shocks me is people are doing this as well to their vaginal skin. They'll come in and say, oh yeah, I threw some alcohol in it, some hydrogen peroxide. And I'm thinking, oh man, we just started a whole nother world of hurt. So what do you tell patients to really avoid putting on that skin, especially if it is itchy or symptomatic, or what are some things, that you feel like people think are safe, but really you're like, nah, not such a good idea?
Yeah, so I've heard the same thing with the alcohol and the peroxide, which now we've just completely disrupted all of the good bacteria. And I'm fine. And some people might do a vinegar soak. That's actually fine because the pH of the vaginal canal is a little bit lower, so that should be fine to use if you're using like a white vinegar type, just to pat. You can get that into the inner and the outer folds of the skin, and you should be just fine. But what's interesting is they might reach for a cream. And as you know, creams are alcohol based. So on occasion, when they'll think that they're using some type of cream, even if it's the over the counter hydrocortisone cream, that vehicle can be really irritating, especially if you're having a problem in the area. So it's the ointments are always safer. And that's why I was saying, well, the Vaselines, and then if we need to do a steroid, we would do that in an ointment base.
And, kind of going along with that, I think it's just reminding, everyone out there that if it's something that really doesn't belong on your regular skin, definitely don't try it on your vaginal skin. I think that's what people sometimes forget. But for things that are good ideas, a lot of people, thinking about it, doing it on a regular basis, we have to talk about sex and its impact on vaginal skin in that area. Because, I think a lot of people don't realize that, whether it's lubrication, maybe condom use, other things that are coming in contact with that, if they're using, let's just face it, accessories, other things that people are doing with intercourse. What do you tell people about kind of being careful with vaginal skin and kind of how it might get irritated, or what they need to be doing to still keep that vaginal skin healthy, but, also feel like they're not, creating another problem for themselves?
Yes, no, I 100% agree. I once had an OB friend tell me that the key for vaginal health is lubrication and inebriation. So I thought that was
It's a good slogan for an
absolutely
OB, which
hilarious.
which leads to the babies that keep them in business. So that's a key. That's a
There,
key.
there was a self-referring phenomena right there. I thought it was fantastic. But in terms of lubrication, yeah, you need to make sure. I would definitely use brands that are well known, like KY. They've done the research. You want a bigger company. You don't want some of these offshoots, or God forbid, I had this is a hairdresser. It was her daughter who was making creams in her kitchen sink, and she's like, yeah, you should try this, you should recommend this for your patients. And I'm thinking, like, she has no idea what the R&D goes into in the bigger companies like P&G. They put so much in terms of testing and making sure that creams are safe and you're not having a reaction to it. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's something, yeah, again, like you point out such good things, but it's true because you have these companies that are marketing to people, different types of products that can enhance, sensation or sexual activity. But there are a lot of things in there that could also be irritating, especially if your baseline skin is not so good, something
Mhm.
that causes tingling, it's definitely probably going to aggravate your skin. Or, they have flavored things that people are using that, again, whether it's fragrance or something else, may not be the best for the skin in that area. And you're right, probably something that someone's making their own home soap lab or lubrication lab, probably not the safest bet for skin. And again, something that people want to be cautious about. And I think too, just the frictional component, skin doesn't love friction, just walking every day, your feet build up calluses from friction, right? And pressure.
Mhm.
Vaginal skin, can happen the same way. So lubrication can be important to minimize that friction so it doesn't really increase irritation with that skin. Because I do think people underestimate what can be irritating, especially just with constant rubbing of that skin if it's not being protected. And, kind of linking to that, over time, women really report, issues with sexual activity because of that skin sort of thinning out, or what we might call atrophy. That we talk about those
Mhm.
tissues change, especially in the inner part of the vaginal skin, that wet mucosal skin. How do you recommend that they treat that to kind of help with some of that thinning? And are there any sort of new and latest developments that are available, maybe even non-surgical approaches to help with that thinning skin as well?
Yes, no, that's a great segue. There are some wonderful things that we can use if patients are complaining of sensation problems, vaginal atrophy, um, if they're having issues with stress and urge incontinence. So there are some devices out there. They first started with a fractional CO2 laser in that area, and then they've now gone on to less invasive. Um, but still, I would call them very minimally invasive. There's a platform that is made by InMode as the company, and the platform is called the Empower. So InMode has different devices that do different things. They have their V-Tone, which is like doing 30,000 Kegels in a half an hour. It's very painless. That really helps with pelvic floor disorders, stress and urge incontinence. On that platform as well, they have what's called the Forma-V, and this is a radiofrequency heat option, and that helps with lichen sclerosis. That can help with vaginal atrophy, and then it's a go-to too for chronic infections and basically any type of sensation problems. That's helpful. And then they have Morpheus for the face and body, but they've developed Morpheus 8V for the vagina, and that does vaginal canal, and also on the outside inner skin, that's labia majora and minora. The whole thing is treated, and that can help with sensation, but that can help also with stress and urge incontinence. And what that does is the needles go in, and then you're numb for this, you don't feel it. As the needles go in, you get
I
this,
hope, yes.
yes, you're totally numb, do not feel it. You get this burst of energy, and that helps increase your collagen. So we're trying to actually thicken that epithelium, because you are totally right. As we get older, that epithelium gets thin.
Wow. So there are devices now for, I'm sure we've piqued some people's interests out there that probably feel like, gosh, what could I do? Or maybe they've even entertained surgical options. So there now are devices out there that can really help if somebody has, issues with peeing too frequently or leakage, that can help tighten some of the tissue there, that may even help with that, correct?
Correct. So
And
stress and urge incontinence, basically, I would say this is all about menopause. It gets much worse when you're perimenopausal and you're in menopause. You have a decrease in the hormones, you have decrease in the skin thickness, and with that laxity, then you have problems. If you've had children, childbearing, that can cause friction in the area, that can cause atrophy, that can also cause, as you know, a little bit of pelvic floor dysfunction. So that's when you go to jump on a trampoline, and all of a sudden you're noticing leakage, and or you cough, and then you pee. I have a lot of friends that complain about that. That's just general pelvic floor dysfunction, and that gets worse as we get older.
And then the other aspect you mentioned, it sounds like with this device, they can tighten the vaginal canal. Is that correct, the way you were explaining it a little bit, if that's been stretched
Yes,
as well?
so it does tighten the vaginal canal. There's also a device that is part of that Empower platform that we can use to actually tighten the skin. And that's a little bit more involved, but we call it it's not the Forma-V. You know what? We'll have to pause that. I'll have to figure out what the name of that is. Um, on the face, we call it AccuTight. You do it around the eyes, but you can do it on the vulva. So essentially, we'll start over. So
Okay.
essentially, we can use this device that is radio frequency, and it tightens the skin. So you can see an increase in collagen, and also, I know there's a physician that has patented this. She calls it the perky peach. We've been calling
Oh,
it the perfect peach. But it does tighten and it pulls up the whole hood for the labia minora and majora and the clitoris. So it does an amazing job of rejuvenating the vaginal area. This is
Mhm.
often post children, post years and years. We're in our 40s
Yeah.
and 50s, and all of a sudden we start to notice things aren't the same as they were 20 years
Oh,
ago.
yeah. So basically what you're saying because it's hard, I know we can't visualize it for our listeners. If, you're noticing sort of that inner mucosal skin, those labia minora kind of loosening over time, even potentially even hanging or kind of just, they don't obviously have the oomph anymore that they used to. But if you're a woman out there that's noticing those types of changes, I think a lot of people thought surgery was really only thing they could do. But it sounds like with devices like this, there are ways to help kind of promote that new collagen development to help really essentially plump that back up a little bit. Is that a good summary, like just in
That
layman's terms?
that's an amazing summary.
Okay.
It is
Because I think
great.
there's people out there like, do I have that or do I not? And probably really frightened to think about doing anything dramatic, but knowing that there's non-surgical options, I think is really important. And it's kind of nice to see that, like, obviously we focus on face, other areas of the body for rejuvenation and tightening. It's kind of nice to see the vaginal areas getting some respect with people that find that to be a problem and really want a solution for it. So that's exciting, I think, in the field of dermatology, obstetrics, and gynecology to see that we're able to offer that to patients.
Oh, I think it's fantastic because yes, we can do vaginal rejuvenation as well as, like you mentioned, facial rejuvenation.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that it is getting some of the respect that it needs, because I think initially women are just going to plastic saying, I need a labiaplasty or I need
Mm.
surgical treatment, when
Yeah.
really there are some minimally invasive treatments that are just causing a revolution in the field.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I thank you so much for coming on today. Just to remind our audience, that vaginal skin is skin. As dermatologists, we can give pointers on how to treat this and take care of that area. And it needs special attention like anything else. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for coming on, giving us a little overview, kind of your thoughts on skincare in that area. For our listeners, if they want to find you, where are you at online or social media if you've got it? How can they locate you?
Our website is www.dermatologyandsskincare.com. We're in Westchester, Ohio. Our Facebook is, again, Dermatology and Skincare and you'll click the one that's in Westchester, Ohio. My Instagram is at Dr. Muennich, so it's DR, and then Muennich is Muennich.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next episode of Derm-It Trotter. Don't swear about skincare.
Thanks for listening to Derm-It Trotter. For more about skincare, visit dermittrotter.com. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who needs a little skincare sanity. Until next time, stay skin smart.